Good morning, and thank you for coming to Asheville VeganFest 2017. This event is put on by and benefits Brother Wolf Animal Sanctuary. It is made possible by our generous sponsors, including A Well-Fed World, Hilton Garden Inn, Asheville Downtown, Health Aid Kombucha, Griffin Web Design, Veg Fund, Whole Foods Market, Divine Residence Health and Research Center, Sanctuary Brewing, O. Henry's, Dog Tag Art, Highland Brewing, Paramount Transportation Systems, and Gaia Herbs. Asheville VeganFest is a celebration of Brother Wolf's uncompromised compassion towards all living beings. 10 years ago, Brother Wolf started by rescuing dogs in need. And over the years, we've expanded to include cats and rabbits and other small animals, as well as cows, chickens, pigs, and even recently, a lamb born without her front legs. Brother Wolf is a vegan organization that has compassion and concern for all living beings. Asheville VeganFest and our program, Asheville Vegan Outreach, strive to give people the information and support they need to look deeper into a vegan lifestyle. All proceeds from this weekend's events go right to the animals. We are in the process of building an 85-acre sanctuary for the animals so that we can help even more. This important work is only possible with your help. At the end of today's panel, there will be volunteers in the back collecting donations. These donations will help us to build our sanctuary, provide care for animals who desperately need our help, and continue to educate the public and grow our circle of compassion. We would greatly appreciate your support of this life-saving work. And now we're ready to begin our first panel of the day, Veganism and Spirituality. Please welcome panel moderator and Brother Wolf staff member, Caitlin Campbell, to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah Craig, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us this morning. We're starting today's packed series of events with a heart-opening discussion on veganism and spirituality. It's important to note that for the intents of this panel, spirituality does not refer to organized religion specifically, but rather to a universal connection to others and a reverence for life. Atheist and agnostic people can be spiritual. Isaac Asimov once wrote, "I've never been particularly careful about what label I placed on my beliefs. I believe in the scientific method and the rule of reason as a way of understanding the natural universe. I've thought of myself as an atheist, but that simply described what I didn't believe in, not what I did believe in." If we look at the root of spirituality, we get spirit, which is variously characterized as self, inner being, mind, and those qualities regarded as forming the definitive elements of the character of a person. Some synonyms: ethos, motivating force, essence, quintessence. This morning we'll attempt to answer questions like, how does one define or measure a spiritual path? And how might one's spiritual beliefs better be reflected in their actions? Spiritual teachings have been used for millennia to make us more self-aware and to help us self-actualize. How then can veganism inform our spiritual practices? And more importantly, why are veganism, animal rights, social justice, and environmental justice relevant to a healthy spiritual practice? Many, if not all, spiritual teachers agree that our interconnectedness and interdependence mandate a compassion and generosity of spirit and a gentleness toward other beings. In Judeo-Christianity, that's called the Golden Rule. And in Eastern religions, that ethos can be seen in the ancient Jain tradition of ahimsa. Still, so many seeking spirituality and enlightenment harm other beings unnecessarily by choosing to consume them. Today, Craig Holliday, Ren Hurst, and James Aspey will be joining us as we ponder these spiritual quandaries and questions. Each of our speakers are activists that can offer advice on spiritual and moral best practices in a world so often consumed by crisis and unnecessary violence. We'll hear from our speakers for 20 minutes each, and then we'll move to a question and answer panel We do have some pre-selected questions, but we will be taking questions from the audience as well. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker. It'll be Ren Hurst, and Ren is a former professional horse trainer and hoof care specialist. She is the president and founder of the New World Sanctuary Foundation and author of 2 books, Riding on the Power of Others, A Horsewoman's Path to Unconditional Love, and the upcoming Animal Lover, Restoring Connection to Wild Wisdom. She experienced a radical shift in perspective that exposed the true harm and exploitation running rampant in the equestrian world and in all forms of animal domestication. But she can tell you much more about that herself, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ren.
Thank you, Caitlin. Well, Caitlin took a lot of that out of the way. So I used to be a professional horse trainer. I'm born and raised from Texas, and in every way that you might associate that meaning. I spent the first 30 years of my life in Texas. I have stood on the slaughterhouse floor, watched the process from start to finish, and was never fazed by it because that was my conditioning, and that's the world that I grew up in. But in a moment with a stallion that I was trying a very esoteric method of relationship with, all of that changed in that suddenly I couldn't look at animals the same way or even anywhere close to the way I had before. And as a professional horse trainer, I wasn't from the more brutal or harsh tactics. I was considered a horse whisperer. But what I came to realize is all that means is that I had become a master manipulator and someone who was able to subtly and insidiously be able to get the results I wanted through small behaviors and ways of controlling others. And unfortunately, what this horse exposed for me is that that was leaking into my personal life as well and affecting me in all areas, not just how I treated animals. And what was shown to me, what basically shattered, is that we live in a paradigm where codependency is masquerading as love, as our understanding of relationship to one another, but especially to animals. And by relating to animals in a way that removes all forms of unnecessary control, and as their guardians, the only thing that we're really responsible for is their basic needs, not their emotional needs. Each one of us as individuals are really responsible for our own emotional needs. But in our domesticated environments with our pets, we're getting our emotional needs met through the pet a lot of the times. And the work that I do now separates that so that we're becoming whole unto ourselves and allowing the animals to become whole unto themselves so that a healthy relationship can take place. And we now have a model of interacting and being in the world that looks like true unconditional love and not exploitation in any form. Even as vegans, a lot of times we're still using animals exploitatively in a way of getting our emotional needs met through the beings in our home. But those are the beings we have the most control over their lives. And so at the very root of how do we change our behavior and how do we show up in the world as conscious human beings, we've got to look at that which we do have the most control over, which are the dependents in our care and ourselves. So the way I relate to animals now allows that to take place so that there is a space of invitation and true consent is being honored with the beings that are around us at all times. But more than that, a lot of the times we don't even realize that a dependent in our care is not actually in a position to offer consent for the use of their body. So that's why I know riding horses for me. I stopped the moment I realized that this being in my care can say yes to me all day long, but because I'm in a position of power over them, because I take care of their basic life needs, it no longer felt good. So what my work looks like now is a removal of all forms of unnecessary control so that true relationship can take place. And in that true relationship, connection is restored so deeply that you no longer want to exploit others or use them or consume them or wear them or do any of the things that lead us outside of a vegan lifestyle, because fundamentally I think that we honestly are that way to begin with. That's what love looks like, is honoring others. So if we're not practicing this in our homes, if we're not practicing what it is to honor another one truly, then our daily practice is going to be reflected in our external environment, and we're creating a reality around us that is exploitative in nature. So as vegans, a lot of times we get hung up on not eating animals and not wearing animals, but the exploitative relationship of codependency is still very rampant. And that's where I think we need to do a lot more work. And it's changed every area of my life. The book, Writing on the Power of Others, was basically my journey as a horse trainer and how I came to these conclusions. The new book that I'm writing and will be coming out hopefully in the next year will expose a new definition of love as this work has taught me, why it's important, why it's necessary, and how to do it in your own home in a very practical, basic way. So I've kind of been from the complete opposite side of the tracks. I now live in Southern Oregon and live a very different life. I founded New World Sanctuary Foundation with the hopes of creating a global network of spaces that would like to offer sanctuary to animals and humans alike as a experiential way to understand this method of relationship and this way of relating to others in an unconditional manner. And also to support people and animals, but people like me who, when a radical shift like this occurs, you're kind of left with not knowing what to do next. The last 4 to 5 years, it's been a real struggle of how do I turn this 6-figure horse training career that I left behind into a way to feed the 19 equines in my care still, take responsibility for them, but now everything I've known in terms of how to make money is not available to me. So New World Sanctuary Foundation is set up for people like myself who were successful in their career of exploiting animals as a way for people to support the animals that are now going to live in sanctuary so that those individuals can make the shift to a life of service and take the time that's necessary to develop the skills to do something more valuable in the world than using animals. Other than that, I now offer coaching and consulting in interspecies relationship dynamics so that people can start to make moves in this direction. And I live a pretty quiet life with my animals all around me and in a way that doesn't look anything like the way I used to use them or train them. And also, this relationship moves you completely beyond the need for training of any kind. I'm even speaking to positive reinforcement. It teaches you how to relate to animals in a way that is much more equal in terms of understanding and communication, but understanding and recognizing that we are still their guardians at the end of the day, not their friends necessarily. And it's very parallel to how conscious parenting would look. And what happens in that dynamic is, it's hard to describe with words. It's experiential in nature. It's ineffable in some ways, but the deep, profound sense of connection that it restores to all life is undeniable, and it never leaves you. And that's the benefit and value of this work, because too often many of us are still reaching for our dog or our cat to feel okay in the world, and that may be our only source of unconditional love. We're still reaching outside of ourselves. And the issues that I'm seeing on the planet are from this externalized sense of power and control rather than finding that from within. And as long as we're surrounding ourselves with domesticated animals and reaching externally for our sense of well-being, we're going to perpetuate that in our personal lives, our relationships with other humans, and in all life on the planet. So it starts at home, it starts inside. And the work I do now just provides a practical way of experiencing what it is to be in true unconditional relationship to another. Other than that, I mean, veganism for me was a result of unconditional love and practice with my animals. I didn't become vegan knowingly. I became vegetarian because I thought it would make me a better horse trainer, because that's crazy. But someone said sometime that that the horse could smell if I had been eating meat, and I was like, I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll just take it into consideration. So I gave up meat, and I'm not sure if it made me a better horse trainer or not, but this form of relationship made me no longer want to do any of that just from a natural inner state. So 5 years ago, I was a steak-consuming Texan with all the stereotypes associated with that, and this changed me so dramatically that there was no going back. So now I live a life of service to the animals and to perpetuating this work and teaching others. And there's just no way that I could have ever found the sense of well-being and peace that exists in my life today by using animals the way that I did. And unfortunately, most people with horses feel like their horses are their sense of joy in the world. You try to take a horse from a horseback rider or especially a professional horse person, that's their biggest fear, because that's where they derive their sense of power and control in the world, is externalized on the backs of these animals. And so to try to take that from them abruptly would be to take their coping mechanism with how do I survive. And so a lot of us need to remember that when we're talking to horse people especially, that that's a symptom of a problem, that that person needs help. It's not necessarily that they're causing harm on purpose. No one has horses to intentionally cause them harm, and every horse person I've ever met loves their horse to the best of their ability. The problem is that we don't know what love is, and we don't know what it looks like in this world. And so we put it out there in the form of codependency rather than what it truly means to honor and respect another. So as vegans, to advocate for veganism, especially in the horseback riding community, to me, it's so important to understand that that person is lacking something and they need support, not to be told that they're wrong, not to be pointed out that they're harming the individual in their care that they love deeply and desperately at times. And the best way we can help one another is to model what it is to be at peace and come from that place rather than making one another wrong. As a horse trainer, if anyone would have come to me and told me I was doing something to harm my horse, that you wouldn't have gotten 5 minutes into conversation with me. I wouldn't have believed it. And in my experience, no one does, because that's their reality. And to try to contradict someone's reality is just an avenue for conflict. So what this work that I do with animals now is it removes all distractions of using the animal in any way, shape, or form, and it returns you to yourself constantly, and it returns them to themselves constantly, so that your source of power is now coming from within, and that you can stay rooted in that and stay grounded in that. And from that place, better decisions are made. Presence is more available, and we're able to understand more and have compassion for ourselves and others. And as long as we're practicing anything but that with the animals in our immediate care, it creates a lot of static from being able to know what's true and what isn't. And we get stuck in the right and wrong world where we're shaming and allowing guilt to rule our decisions, which isn't very long-lasting in my experience. So that's kind of where I come from. What's our time limit on this? I'm not really paying attention. So for me, veganism is a result of proper spirituality, not necessarily a spiritual path. Not that it can't be both, absolutely. But I think when we speak to veganism as a path, we have to include the exploitative dynamic of codependency in our relationship to domesticated beings in our care. So if we're not considering that, it doesn't take you as deeply as it can. If we're not eating animals and we're not wearing animals and we're not using animals, obviously, but we're still reaching for them to meet our emotional needs, it's not going to affect you and restore the connection as deeply as is available to us. And it's that place that changes everything. So that's really all I have to say on that subject.
Thank you so much, Ren. Our next speaker will be Craig Holliday. And Craig is a satsang teacher, a spiritual activist, and a licensed professional counselor. He teaches others to live from the heart, fusing Western psychology and Eastern spiritual wisdom. Craig is a veteran to the Asheville VeganFest stage, and his words bring clarity and inspiration. Please welcome Craig Holliday.
Well, thank you for inviting me back again this year. I was in the elevator this morning, and I reached for my eyeglasses to clean them. I noticed that the lady right next to me, she was also cleaning her glasses. I think that she started to clean her glasses first. And for a moment I thought, whose thought was this? Was it her thought, or was it my thought? And very much like what Ren was saying, the way things spread in this world is through modeling, through our vibrational frequency, through how we act and share in this world. So for me, veganism was simply a movement of love. It wasn't something that I chose or thought much about. It was something that just simply arose in my heart and continues to arise in my heart. And I think what Ren was speaking about so much was, are we connected? What aspect of ourselves are we connected to? Are we connected to this deep presence of wisdom, this deep stillness and love in our heart? Or are we connected with some, outward philosophy or movement of conditioning? And so an ongoing question for us, just throughout our day and throughout our lives is, from what place are we living from? God gave each of us these beautiful hearts. As I woke up this morning and I started to walk over here, I stopped at that big town park. And I sat, there's nobody there. I just sat out in the center of it and experienced such a spaciousness and a unity, feeling a deep connection with the birds and the trees and the wind. And of course there was traffic driving by and all kinds of things happening. But we have this invitation every moment to connect with this beauty within us. And this beauty will show us how to move in the world if we allow it. But it requires that we're silent inside, that we take the time to unhook from the busyness of our minds and also the conditioning that we received. I've spent the last 20 years living in southwest Colorado, and Colorado it's a very interesting state. It's especially where I live, it's almost like where, say, Asheville would meet Texas. So there's incredible progressive movements there. But then there's also very traditional, conservative ranching communities. And at one point, I found myself in this very bizarre position. I had my young daughter, Amaya. She wanted to be a part of the 4-H club. And, I remember when I was a child, my mother took my older brother to 4-H, and he learned how to, train, our golden retriever. So I said, yeah, sure, Amaya, we can do the 4-H club. And she went to some meetings about, taking care of bunny rabbits or something. And I thought, oh, that's just wonderful. And then, one day we found ourselves at it was like a rodeo arena. And some of her girlfriends were going to do it was like some sort of competition where they're on a horse, and there was a goat out in the arena, and it was quite wild. I was like, what am I watching here? And these little girls on horses would charge a goat, jump off it real quickly like a cowgirl, and get out on the ground and take a rope and hog tie the goat's legs, and they were timed. It was like a contest. And in that moment, my heart just broke. I thought, what's going on here? And there's people cheering, and they just thought this was a normal thing to do. You see this little goat out in the center there, terrified. He's like, what the hell is this? This girl on this horse charging at me, and why are they, you pick the goat up and you throw it on the ground and you wrangle it and tie it up, and then I think someone blows a whistle or something. But I think Maya looked at me and I looked at her, and it was hard for me to hold back the tears. But when your heart is open, you can be awake to this greater consciousness. You can make conscious decisions. You can choose to leave a situation like that and say, maybe there's a different way of living in the world. It's this kind of shift that Ren was speaking about, of being connected with your heart, letting your heart guide you. Even if it means, leaving a great career, even if it means leaving an old community that sees that that's okay to do. And there's normally this journey, and I think a lot of vegans struggle with this, is it feels as if you live on the outside of the world because you're making such it seems like a radical decision. It can seem even fanatical to say, I don't eat meat, and I don't eat this or that, and I can't wear this thing or that thing, and you can feel quite alone and isolated in the world. But if you make this decision and you're connected from your heart, and you're opening and trusting, and you connect from a place of strength and courage, and connect into a greater strength, a greater courage, and ask for support, life will meet you. And life will bring you new friends in a new community. And sometimes it requires that you plant the seeds first. And so one of the beautiful things that we do at our house, and I think is one of the most eco-friendly or vegan-friendly things we can all do, is to plant a garden. To plant the little seeds and to talk to them and water them every morning. And that can become a spiritual practice. I've spent 20 years of my life meditating and spending so much time in silence. For a while, my teenage daughter used to tell me I was addicted to it, because I loved sitting in silence so much. But now one of my favorite things to do is to get up and just walk outside and walk into the greenhouse and water the little plants and watch them grow each day, to feel that sense of connection and unity with them. And there's this wonderful vibration that's there in a garden or in a greenhouse. It just makes your heart open. You feel so connected with all of life. You feel this purity as if you're in, a temple. It's quite profound. It's quite healing for the spirit. It's probably the opposite experience of, say, watching, some of the footage that you see, from, the PETA website, where there's just so much. You see the violence of a slaughterhouse and the brutality there. It just makes you want to scream and run in the opposite direction. You feel the pain and the suffering in the animals. You can even feel the pain and the suffering in the workers who are there. You can imagine how much pain you must have in your heart to work in a slaughterhouse and to be unfazed by it. And your heart has to be closed or deeply conditioned to think that that's normal. I see this movement of veganism. It's a movement of compassion. It's a movement of consciousness. So the great invitation is can we put our words, our speech, our actions into planting gardens in the world, planting the seeds of compassion. Of course, it's quite necessary to to protest and raise the consciousness of the planet and to expose what's going on. Because I think if most people knew what was going on, in the factory farming industry and the way we treat animals, I think most people would be horrified. So it's important to do all those activities, but it's also important to plant gardens, to connect with your heart, and let that truth guide you. Let that movement of love and compassion guide you in the world. Because if we're not connected with our heart, we just let the conditioning of the planet, the previous generations, the unchecked consciousness lead us forward. But now is the time of incredible change in the world. And the change deepens and solidifies. It becomes permanent if we're deeply connected. But if we're just connected with our emotional mind or our thinking mind, then the change, it just goes quickly. We just move on to the next idea. It just becomes one movement after the next that kind of fizzles out and doesn't go anywhere. And I'm sure we all have friends who, they became a vegetarian for a couple weeks or a couple days, or they tried veganism for a day. Why do you think that's funny? I mean, it was a good try, But when we're truly connected with our heart, things deepen, they intensify. It becomes who and what we are in the world. And to be honest, our planet at this time is begging us to connect in this deep way. To drop into the silence of our heart and to listen to its truth. Listen to its movement of compassion and peace. And to allow this to lead us forward. And like Ren was saying, it's not just about what we eat and not wearing leather. Veganism is synonymous with compassion. Are we being compassionate in every aspect of our life? Every aspect. Every dollar we spend is a vote in the world. Every word we speak, every action we do, it spreads something in this world. And just like the lady who I was on the elevator with, she moved me with her thoughts to clean my glasses. How powerful is that? Can we model love in the world? Can we model deep, heartfelt connection and compassion in the world? Can we share joy? Can we share our healthy diet, our healthy food? It's not just healthy for us, it's healthy for everyone and everything. It's not just veganism. It's consciousness. It's spreading throughout the planet. It's a huge invitation. And so every moment we have this choice. What are we choosing? What are we doing? How are we acting? And this isn't something for our internal vegan judgmental critic to take over within the space of our neurotic minds. It's a gentle question for our hearts. Can we let go of that critical nature Can we let go of the inner vegan policeman or policewoman and just ask our heart, what is true? What is good? What is wise? What is compassionate? In this moment, and live from that gentle, loving place, and have the courage for that to lead us forward in our lives. It's only through that, and listening to that voice and that truth, will our world change. It's only through listening to that voice and connecting will we truly be happy, truly at peace, and truly live in a sustainable, compassionate, and open-hearted way. So thank you again for having me back this year.
Thank you so much, Craig. Our last speaker this morning is James Aspey, and James is an animal activist hailing from Australia. A few years ago, he took a 1-year vow of silence on behalf of the voiceless animals stuck in fatal and exploitative industries. Having lived through transformative battles with life-threatening illnesses himself, James is in touch with the suffering, and his empathy for others shines through in the way he lives his life. In his own words, James replaced drugs, cancer, and bulimia with surfing, veganism, and meditation. So without further ado, please welcome James Aspey.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to stand. It's what I'm used to, yeah. Man, that was so good. You really calmed my nerves with your voice. Well, I'm going to have to get onto that meditation class, I think. It's kind of hypnotizing. When I found out I was going to be doing a speech on veganism and spirituality, which was last night, I should really read my emails more carefully. I thought, oh man, why am I on that panel? I'm not spiritual, you know? I'm not a spiritual person. I don't see myself that way. I'm not religious. I don't have like a collection of crystals. I do burn incense sometimes, but that's just because I think it smells good. So I thought, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. So I thought, well, what is spirituality? And that's what I kind of started thinking about. What is spirituality? And I guess what I came to the conclusion of is that spirituality, I think, in my opinion, is living in line with spirit, living in line with your spirit. And then I thought, that's a relief. I am doing that as best as I can. So I think what that really means is that to be a spiritual person, to live spiritually, you need to find out what you're really about, what you're really made of, what is really important to you, what your core values are, and then to do your best to align with each and every one of those things so that you can feel the way that you're supposed to feel. You know, you should feel spiritual if that's what it's about. You should feel like you're living in alignment with your core values. And the benefit of that is so far-reaching. And the negative implications of not doing that are also so far-reaching. So for me, I think veganism goes so hand in hand with that. And I can just tell you through my own experience, because for so many years in my life, I lived without caring about animals at all. I cared about animals less than pretty much everybody that you would know. I thought they were disgusting, dirty, slobbery. You know, when I tell people that in my speeches, how I just didn't care, people are like, is this the guy, man? Is this the guy that did that thing, the vow of silence? But I really felt nothing for them. I remember we ran over a rabbit one day and the girls were crying and I just felt nothing. I'd seen slaughterhouse footage before of animals being tortured, mutilated, killed. And my brother, he said to me, he told me to watch it. He said, you'll never eat meat again after this. And I said, what is this documentary? This must be amazing. You know, I thought it was probably a health thing. And when I watched it and I saw these animals getting slaughtered, I thought, that's what he meant? I wouldn't want to eat meat again after seeing animals slaughtered? I couldn't care less about this. bro, I thought you knew me, man. Like, I don't care about animals at all. And I think about that now, and I think how far I've come, and I think, whoa, man, what kind of sick monster were you? But it wasn't that. I was a good person. To the best of my ability, I would never deliberately hurt an animal. I didn't hate animals or despise animals. I never tried to hurt anybody. My goal in life was to always be a good person and to help others and to be kind. I was a little bit selfish sometimes, but I tried pretty hard to be a good person. So my experience is a little bit different to Ren's, because I think you said that veganism was a natural progression for you, and you, through being loving, you got to that point. Where for me, I kind of see my own journey a little bit differently. I think what happened to me, I don't think I really could feel for these animals while I was eating them. So I don't know if I maybe would have got there just by being a loving person. I feel like I was already doing a pretty good job of that. And since some of the things I've gone through, I've read a Buddhist quote, and the quote is, "The eating of meat extinguishes the seed of great compassion." And luckily for me, I tried going vegetarian for a week just for my health. And during that time, I felt really good, and so I decided to look more into it. And that's when I saw what happened to the animals again. And I'd seen it before, like I mentioned, but this time when I saw it, I felt something. I hadn't eaten meat for a while. I felt something. And I saw it, and I thought, whoa, I remember very similar footage to this, but this is not sitting well with me today. I don't think I'm okay with this. And so I don't know if that's a real scientific thing you can study. I'm not sure, but to me that quote reigns true. I think while I was consuming animal products, it was extinguishing my seed of great compassion. While I was eating them, I couldn't feel for them. It was too conflicting for me. Perhaps it was just like a psychological thing, like a cognitive dissonance. I couldn't feel for them. And so grateful that I just tried it out for a week and actually felt good and didn't just eat lettuce and tofu the whole time. I thought, maybe I could stick with this. I felt really good. So that's when I started living more spiritually, to put it like that. That's when I realized, well, hang on a second, what are my core values? Let me ask myself that question. Peace, being a peaceful person, being a respectful person, being a loving person, being a compassionate person, non-violent. And I was being those things to humans, to one species, and kind of to dogs. I didn't love them, but I was like, they're okay. I'm not going to eat them. But I thought, why aren't I extending those qualities, those very positive qualities? Why aren't I extending those to other species? Why am I just keeping it for a select few? And I couldn't really answer that question for myself, which was annoying because I didn't want to stay being a vegetarian, obviously. And I thought, oh man, this is not the life for me, I love eating meat, I love the taste and all that. But what far outweighed the taste of meat is that I did want to live in alignment with those qualities, because that is so much more important. Being a good person, modeling good behavior that's been spoken about here, that is so much more important in a world that is so far off the mark, so far from that. There's so much disaster and destruction and tragedy in this world, and so much of it is avoidable. I think it's actually just a lack of something, like Ren said. It's a lack of love. It's a lack of compassion. It's a lack of living spiritually, living in alignment with your core values. So many otherwise good people, unknowingly in a big way, are being very violent and very cruel and very abusive through the choices we make and through the products we consume. When we consume the products of violence and torture and death, surely that has some effect on us. And I don't know if this is true, because I saw it on the internet, but I did see this cool photo on the internet one time. I don't know what they're called. Maybe someone here does. There's these photos, these cameras they take, and it like measures someone's aura or something. Curlian camera, nobody knows. Great. I don't know either. Anyway, I don't look. It's like this thing, and it puts this kind of measures the energy around it or something. Now, I don't even know if this is legit. I'm not saying this is a thing, so just hear me out here. But there was this photo they took of a piece of meat, allegedly, and it was this like dim and patchy kind of surrounding energy, right? And then they took a photo of an apple, and the apple was beaming. It looked so good. It had this beautiful thing happening around it. I don't know if they're a real thing, but I think there's some truth to that anyway, whether those cameras are real or not. There's some truth to that consuming the energy of death versus consuming the energy of life is going to have a big change on who we are as people, on our psyche, because when we eat and consume the products of violence and torture and death, I do believe, just through the experience I've had, that in some significant way, it does extinguish the seed of great compassion. And I think we can see that when we talk to good people. You know, when we talk to otherwise good people and say, hey, guess what? You're an animal lover, right? Well, there's this new thing out called veganism. It's really cool. And it means you don't have to contribute to the violence and killing of these beautiful, innocent, sentient beings. And people say, I don't want to hear about it. Don't spoil my dinner, man. You know? And then it's confusing because you think, but you're such a good person. I'm telling you about so much violence that is being contributed to by you, and you don't have to be. So it's a confusing thing, and I think there's a big part of that is because of this turned off part of people's compassion. And I think it's an unconscious thing. I don't think people do this deliberately, but I do think that there's some sort of effect of when we eat these things, when we consume these things, when we buy these things, you know, especially when it's a little bit conscious in you. You know, ignorance is one thing. When you don't know, you don't know. But when you're starting to hear a little bit about veganism, oh, my mate went vegan the other day, and then you're buying these things, and then you're eating these things, it's a little bit less unconscious. And I think that makes it a little bit more serious on how it affects our psyche. You know, it's a more negative thing to do then because you're a little bit more aware about what you're doing. So I think this has a massive effect on our world. I always wonder, what would our world be like if there wasn't so much violence and killing and cruelty in the air? Kind of like what you were talking about with when that woman cleaned her glasses and you were feeling it. You're like, oh my, for some reason I feel like cleaning my glasses right now. I think right now, there is so much cruelty and killing, senseless murder, billions and billions and trillions actually of innocent beings who feel pain and suffer just like us. They want to be with their families and take care of each other just like us in a lot of ways. And we slaughter them for no better reason than because we like how they taste. So when there's so much cruelty in the air, when there's slaughterhouses 30 minutes from here and factory farms that way, when this is all around us and even closer to home, when we are ingesting this inside of us and almost everybody is it any wonder that we are in the type of world that we are, where violence is the norm? I put up a quote last night on my Facebook and Instagram by John Lennon, which I'm probably going to get wrong because the pressure's on. So it was something like, we live in a world where, I'm going to get this wrong. We live in a world where love-making has to be hidden and violence is normal to be out in the open. It was put more eloquently than that, but you get the point. You get the point. So that is the world we live in. Violence is on everybody's plate, you know? And people don't even see it there. I never saw it. I was just eating my food. You know, people don't even see it. Or if they do know what happened, they think it's fine. They think it's okay. So that's the world we live in. And what else is happening in this world? War, greed, harming each other, harming ourselves, depression, stress, anxiety, medicating ourselves with those things, drugging ourselves from the feelings we have, watching TV to drug ourselves, eating food to drug ourselves, to numb ourselves from all of these things. This is the world we live in, where we can't even really sit here and be comfortable just by sitting here. And perhaps, I don't know, but I have a feeling that because of what is so rampant in our society, that carries some kind of energy, or putting it inside of us, that carries some kind of negative energy. And so we're born into it, so we don't even feel the difference of it. It's just here, it's just there. We're born into it, we don't know any different. But we feel stressed and we feel anxious and we feel tired and we don't want to associate with each other, or we do with anger and all these kind of things. And I always wonder, how much better would we all just feel if all of that cruelty, all of that negative energy just ended? How much more positive would we feel? Would we feel more positive? I think so, but obviously I can only speak from my own experience that by going vegan, I feel more aligned with who I am in my core. I do feel more peace because I know that my actions are creating more peace. I do feel like I'm aligned more with non-violence because I know my actions are less violent than they were before. I do feel more love because my circle of compassion has grown. It's not just about humans anymore and the occasional dog that doesn't slobber on me. It's grown to even fish, which I don't even, like when you look at cows, yeah, they've got big, beautiful eyes and they're cute and things like that. I don't find fish very cute, but I still care. I still don't want people to hook them in the mouth and kill them, And so I feel so great that I feel so privileged and so extremely grateful that something I think we're all kind of searching for. How can we feel more love? How can we feel more compassion? How can we live more spiritually, live more aligned with the people that we are? It's so easy. You can just go vegan and get more of those things you want, more of those good feelings, and contribute to far less of those negative things. And that's how we can create a better world. It's as simple as you get to the supermarket and you usually buy cow's milk and you just do that. And you get almond milk instead, and you walk out like, I did a good deed today. Yeah. It's so easy. I mean, and there is one good thing about how bad it is what we do today, how cruel our actions are, because there's so much room for improvement. There's such a great deal of room for improvement, and that improvement can be made so simply. But the first and foremost, before you point the finger, before you even encourage someone else to do better, is about looking in the mirror. Where am I causing harm? How can I contribute to making this world a better place? How can I reduce the amount of harm I'm already causing? How can I live more in alignment with my core values, whatever they are? But I think for most people I've ever met, the core values are generally very similar in good people. Be peaceful, be kind, be loving, be compassionate, be respectful, be non-violent. And the beauty of that is there's a very clear path to get to that point, and we all know what that is. So next step, once you've gone vegan, spread that gift, spread that love, and that's how we make this world a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James, Craig, and Ren. That was beautiful. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us. So now we're going to move into a question and answer panel discussion. We have a few pre-selected questions, and we'll also be taking questions from the audience as well. If you would like to ask a question, please line up by the microphone in the middle of the theater, and we'll take as many questions as we can. If you're on the balcony, simply raise your hand. Okay. So I can start. And I guess one of the questions we talked about was, how would you define or measure a spiritual path? And feel free to just have a conversation. If anybody has initial thoughts, you can start.
It was how to define a spiritual path.
Yes, how would you define or measure a spiritual path?
Well, for me personally, it's that point from which you stop operating in the world for yourself and in service to all life, and how in alignment you are with that when it becomes less about me and more about everything. So.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And, for me, it's always been about how connected are you to your heart? Are you willing to be silent and to listen to that deep wisdom within you? If you ever look at the great spiritual teachers of this planet, they're not up in their heads thinking, they're not, crazy emotional. They're deeply connected just to this movement of grace. They're allowing it to pour through them. It's this type of thing that moves us in our life. It's this thing that connects us deeply. And this is what spirituality is all about. When we live from that place, we ultimately end up living a life of service.
I agree.
Okay, and I'll gladly take your question.
Thank you all for being here and everything that you do for the animals. My question is for you, Ren. I've always worked with animals. I've been a vet tech of small cats and dogs and always prided myself on, this is pre-vegan, having well-behaved dogs to the best of my ability. So, I was somewhat of a informal dog trainer. And since going vegan, we rescued a 10-year-old Chow Shepherd mix, and she's a handful. And we love her. She's so sweet, but she has like this prey drive, and she wants to kill things. And obviously we don't want her to do that. We know it's like kind of instinctual, but like, what would you do in that situation? Like, what do we do? Like, I don't want her to kill anything, but at the same time, it's like, it's kind of what they do. That's what she does, And so, yeah, I just was wondering what you would do.
Well, unfortunately, training makes the answer simple. It's very specific. This is what you do. This is the results you get. Unfortunately and fortunately, the work that I do means that training's off the table, and you have to make your relationship to her so significant in her life that she looks to you for answers and guidance and isn't as reactive. She's no longer a prisoner of her biology.
Yeah.
Now that there's a connection so restored, there can actually be a conversation that happens where the fact that you don't want her to do her natural biological instincts is more important to her than just being in reactivity. And a lot of times we don't even understand that animals are capable of evolving beyond their instincts.
Yeah.
But it's not true. I have a husky, and was in a very similar position, and she caused the death to many animals before I learned how to do this work. So the short answer is to spend a lot of one-on-one time in a way that increases your bond, but doesn't use each other for emotional needs. Okay. Just one-on-one presence. If you could spend 10 minutes a day with her in absolute acceptance, allowance, and present attention, just see if that alone can change. Okay. And if that doesn't create a significant enough change for you to follow, feel free to reach out to me. But it's not a short answer.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Can I say something about that as well? I think that ideally, animals, everyone's just doing what they want to do and things like that. But I think when we're talking about stopping an animal from causing harm to another animal, although you kind of do feel bad, it's just natural for this animal, you should just let them do what they want to do. I think when an animal is in your care and your responsibility, and probably you're taking care of that animal because if you don't, it's at a pound or it's going to, on death row, that kind of thing. So I think it is acceptable to say that there are some compromises that should be made. And when it comes to an animal who has a violent streak, I think that it's acceptable to do your best to manage that behavior by making sure, that it doesn't maybe get outside without you or things like that. I think that's fair enough because although perhaps sometimes it may be frustrating for that animal to not be able to go and kill a bird or something, I think what trumps that is that you are protecting a victim of violence from far more suffering and losing their life compared to maybe a few moments of frustration for the animal in your care.
Excellent point. Thank you.
And I absolutely agree with that also. While you're developing the relationship, you can't allow the animal to do anything and everything it wants. You
I was
still
feeling
are
guilty, you know?
responsible. Yeah, you're still responsible for basic needs and well-being.
Okay.
So when I speak to not using control in relationship to animals, I'm talking about your personal relationship with the animal, not your responsibility as their caretaker to make sure things like that don't happen. That's a given for sure.
Thank you for clearing that up. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep, feel free to step up and ask your question.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. I'm pretty short. Can you hear that? Okay. So I'm just going to read this because I'm going to butcher the quote otherwise. But Jeremy Bentham once said, "The question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer?" And I have, for much of my vegan life, guided myself with that philosophy. Recently, though, I've started thinking, we talk a lot about things like factory farms and the atrocious things that happen in factory farms, but then that sort of opens the door for a lot of people who aren't really ready to maybe hear about veganism to go, oh, well, I get grass-fed cows. No, I have happy chickens and that kind of thing. So I'd just like to hear your take on things like, why is suffering the standard? I don't know that oysters suffer, but they're not mine to own, or to do things with, so I'm not sure that should necessarily be the standard that we use. So I'm just curious as to what all three of you, if that's okay, what your take is on that.
I'll start, please. It's a good question. Jeremy Bentham says it's about suffering. I disagree. It's not just about suffering. It's about using them. It's about exploiting them. It's about taking what's theirs that isn't yours. Jeremy Bentham was not a vegan, and if I remember correctly, he wasn't even a vegetarian, so he was just talking, I might write this down, sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that it's more than just suffering because, if you still take the life of someone who didn't want to die, but they don't feel it and they don't see it coming, you've still committed an act of cruelty because you've robbed this individual of their greatest gift, and maybe they didn't suffer even for a moment, but it doesn't matter because you still murdered them, basically.
They were not yours.
That's right.
Yeah.
That life wasn't yours to take, and that life was being enjoyed by someone else, and you took it. So I think it's not about suffering. That isn't the standard, in my opinion. The premise is that animals are not our property. We don't get to choose whose lives we own. We've made that mistake with other humans in the past and we realize how wrong it is. And it's simply about extending that to other species and realize they aren't our lives either. This is my life, that's your life. These are the only ones we're responsible. These are the only ones that we can claim ownership of. And we don't get to use anyone else in a dominant way or in any way that isn't something that they would want done to them. So we can help them, but we don't get to just use and kill, when we're ready, even if they don't suffer. I don't think suffering is the standard.
Sorry, so how do you circle that back to, there are many people who will use spirituality or religion to say, oh, well, they were put here for us. So this is a question that, well, yeah, sorry.
What have you done?
That really wasn't pointed about that issue, but I'm just curious to kind of hear, because I struggle to get people to open their hearts to do that, and I'm just looking for help with that.
Oh dear. Okay, so, well, religion is another topic, and I think the beauty of it is that there's no religion that mandates you need to consume animal products to be a good Christian or Muslim or whatever. There's also many things. I think the core principle of all religions is love and compassion, as far as I know. And so I think as well that you have a very strong argument to say that taking an individual's life and robbing them of their entire future, of their gift from God, is not a loving act. A loving act is to take care of and to help and to nurture when needed and to let them live. So I think people who are using religion as an excuse, I don't think that the act of killing is an act in alignment with their religion, and I think that it's a tough conversation because some of these scriptures and things like that, they do have contradicting, don't eat meat, but eat some meat. It's a bit confusing. But I think the thing is, the beauty of it is that you can always come back to no religion tells you that you have to. So you always have a choice. God gave us free will, is how it's told, right? And that free will is for us to choose. And I think it goes also back to the golden rule. So you can choose. Would you like to be killed without any suffering? Or would you just prefer not to be killed at all? Yeah.
I'd like to speak to this one as well, too. So I've dealt with this a lot, this whole idea of soul contracts, that every being decides before they come into physical manifestation what they're going to experience and whatever. And I've had a lot of spiritual teachers and mentors in my own life use that excuse with me when I went vegan. And here's what I have to say to that. I didn't sign any contract that said that I had to show up and not have a choice of what I do with my basic practical actions in this world. And just because another being has some soul acceptance of what they experience in this life doesn't mean that I have to take part in it if it looks like violence and exploitation and destruction. And so we each have an individual choice, like James said, to be however we're going to be in this world and show up in our actions. And just because on some soul level it may be okay or not okay, or everything's all okay in the bigger scheme of things, doesn't mean that I have to partake in anything that doesn't resonate as true with my soul. So.
One of the things that I would like to add is I always like to look at everything within a spiritual and yet evolutionary context. I just look at, what is the evolution of the planet look like? What does the evolution of consciousness look like? And so, yes, maybe once upon a time someone wrote a quote about, suffering being the gauge for this or that. But, like James was saying, I think love should be the gauge. Is our life, is it moving towards greater and greater manifestations of love? Or are we moving back towards archaic times? Of course, there was a time when, people were hunter-gatherers, and we've evolved out of that. And hopefully we're evolving into something greater. And so our movements and our actions in alignment with something greater. And are we acting in a way where that can share and it can spread so that one day we don't have to have a vegan festival? There'd be something, it'd be silly. It'd be like having a Puritan dance or something. It'd be like, who wants to do that? When we walked up the staircase here, I don't know if any of you noticed the pictures of all the old, white dudes on the wall, but if you could feel into their consciousness. I mean, it felt very old, it felt very heavy, it felt very dense. They would probably have no idea what veganism was, or even vegetarianism would seem absolutely silly or bizarre to them. But as our planet grows, as our consciousness evolves, it's not just us, our individual consciousness. It's the consciousness of the whole. It's all growing together. And so are we acting from our highest place inside? And as we do so, this movement, it spreads in huge ways. It becomes like I'd like to say like a disease, but the opposite of a disease, something incredible. Spreading. And then the world changes. And the world changes to where we're not seeing, just the gauge being, well, does it have reasoning power or this or that? If anyone spends any time with animals or spends time in nature, you realize that the intelligence of nature is so much beyond man's reasoning. I mean, it's incredible to see how much truth and intelligence can move through. How even a crab or a snake or I mean, one of my great teachers, he was out in the middle of Death Valley in California. And an old donkey came up to him and just looked at him in the eye. And he saw the whole universe in this donkey's eyes. It's like so much is available there, but I think we were taught at some point, in the so-called, age of enlightenment, that reason was the highest level of something. But there's so much more available if we just open our hearts and connect to a being, and then it doesn't even become an issue. You look at that and you say, I wouldn't even think of eating that. Some people ask me if I miss eating meat. I don't even imagine meat as being food. It doesn't seem like it's something to eat. But I think that's how consciousness grows, is it just starts to deepen and develop within us.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Good question.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much indeed to the speakers. It's been very inspiring listening to three of you today. Certainly, I feel much more open because of it. I'm sure a lot of other people do too. My question is not really so much a question, it's more about ideas. Those of us that are atheist or agnostic or have rejected the idea of organized religion or an external spiritual being are often seen by people that we tell we're atheist or agnostic or whatever as having some sort of lesser morality or principles or something like that. And that seems to be very much at conflict with the ideas of veganism and compassion and the idea that how we behave in the world colours what we see, what we do, our relationships. So I guess my question is, how do you see that conflict manifesting? What can we do as vegans and as people that may not have traditional religion in order to actually express those principles in a way which resonates with people that either are religious or are not vegan or vegetarian?
Great question. Simple answer, I think. Model good behavior. Model amazing behavior. Be compassionate, be loving, show people through your actions that if you are somebody who has rejected religion and is atheist or agnostic or something, that those belief systems aren't what governs your good nature and your morality, and you can prove that. It's one thing to say you're a good person, I believe in Jesus or whatever, but really what we're looking at, I think what we should be looking at is people's actions. And I think it goes the same for somebody who doesn't subscribe to a particular religion. Okay, maybe this person doesn't subscribe to a particular religion, but they do so much for the community and they help so much, and every time I meet them, they have good vibes, like model the good behavior. And I think that's the best way to break any stereotype, Don't be an angry vegan, be a peaceful vegan. So I think modeling good behavior is definitely the best way to show people that you don't need to believe in a particular book or a particular religion in order to be a good and kind person.
Can I ask, what's your name?
Paul.
Paul?
Yeah.
So Paul, one of the things that I noticed about you is that you're deeply connected with your heart. That's the most important thing. You have a soft and gentle nature. Doesn't matter if you have a creed or a book that you bow before, or you go to this church or that church. The most important thing is that you're connected to that gentleness in the center of your chest. And I feel that in you, and it's a beautiful thing. So that's your God, that's your truth. And that is the one God in all of us. It's a beautiful thing. I wouldn't worry about any label of this or that, When people tell me they're an atheist, I never believe them. I think it's impossible to believe so. If you have a heart, you're connected to yourself. You're connected to your truth.
If you don't mind, I've just got a sort of like a short follow-up question. And what it is, I think that it kind of like comes back to actually what you just said, which is that when we actually start to analyze our lives in terms of the compassion that we show, what we believe in, what our boundaries are, one of the things that we often get into the downward spiral of is being self-critical, i.e., where do I choose to spend my dollars? Where do I choose to, if this sneaker has been manufactured in China, am I okay buying it because of how people are treated out there? So basically, I suppose that where is the practicality about where that particular thinking stops, and how do you stop that being self-destructive or that sort of like downward spiral of being self-critical?
Yes, as far as working with the inner critic, I mean, it's all a matter of, which voice are you going to listen to? If you listen to that critic, I mean, hell, he'll have an argument from now till the end of time, And so it's just that willingness to drop him and to come into your heart. And then once you're in your heart, I invite you to look back out at him and just to ask him, like, hey, what do you need? What's going on with you? One of the things that I found is that critic is trying really hard to help. He's trying very hard to help. But sometimes, he tries to help like, I don't know if you have a mother-in-law, but sometimes a mother-in-law or a father-in-law will come to your house and we're really going to help you out. I'm going to tell you what to do in every single moment.
She's okay.
Yeah, you say, okay, that's not always helpful, but one of the things that can be healing is if you can see that inner critic or the inner mother-in-law or father-in-law, that they're trying to be loving and that they're trying to help. And when you see that and when you honor that, the critic begins to relax, begins to chill out. And then he can integrate in a healthy way within your heart, and then he becomes the movement of discernment. Discernment is quite different than criticism. Discernment is connected with your heart and with this place of truth. Oftentimes with people, and don't take this personally because we all do this, but people who aren't connected deeply with God or deeply, fully in our heart, we kind of split. And we have these different voices. We have our good heart, which I feel in your presence, but then we might have, what I call like the vegan police inside that are saying, oh, you can't do this, can't do that. Some of my country western friends will tell me, Craig, don't drink the water, don't breathe the air, you might melt. And it's just like, yeah, okay, I got it, But the question is moment by moment, can I listen to my heart? Can I let it guide me? In a relaxed way, but a way that's in alignment with truth. Very much like what James was speaking about. Are we connected? Are we listening to our heart? And that requires listening to the softest voice inside, which is different than the critic. The critic is the loudest. We all have that vegan policeman who's like, oh my God, can't eat that, can't touch that, can't do this. What will my friends think, or this or that? But it ends up being crazy. We just do our best in a loving and gentle way, and things tend to work themselves out.
Thanks, very helpful. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Thank you all for talking about the things that you talked about. It's been really great to hear. My question is, throughout my education at a religious institution that does follow a book, I've been taught to conceive of spirituality as something that, in an embodied and expressive sense, as something that applies exclusively to human beings. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to how that kind of spirituality in an embodied and expressive sense applies to animals, and how we as human beings connect to that in concrete ways.
I'll start. For me, what my work and my spirituality has become is the recognition that each of us, everyone, animals, humans, and even inanimate objects, are different physical expressions of the same universal connected thing. So when I relate to animals now, it's like, everybody likes to throw the word namaste out. It's namaste in action. It's practically applied, seeing the essence of the other that is the sameness in me and relating to that as well. So a little bit on the last question too, what if the most important action we take in our advocacy as vegans is a radical and total acceptance of ourselves and an understanding of what we truly are, and the ability to recognize that in every other being that we interact with. How would we behave differently? Would we need to change our actions externally, or would our actions naturally change externally as through a recognition of that?
I totally agree. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's realizing that what we have in common with the animals is abundantly more than what we don't share with them. And all the things that matter are the things that we have in common. So I think if you are valuing humans up here and every single of the millions of other species down here, I think then you don't truly understand who these animals are, because you're judging them based on just not being part of this species, and that isn't a good way to judge the value of other beings. In fact, we shouldn't be judging them at all, but what we should be seeing is the similarities that we have with them. And there's just countless, in fact, almost everything we share in common. The only difference is no one here is covered in feathers or scales or wings or fur. But we all have a heart, we all have a brain, we all have families, we all eat and breathe and sleep and have blood in our veins and everything. So I think when the biggest thing for me was making that connection that these are people, man. They're people too. They're non-human people. You know, they got their own community. They got their own ways of communicating. I just see them now so much more like me than I ever did before. And I think that's helped me put us all on an even playing ground. It doesn't mean that humans aren't superior in some ways, but an eagle is superior in some ways to humans. You know, it's not about that. It's about, I think, just like what you said, Ren, it's about seeing the similarity and embracing what we have in common so that we can all see ourselves as equal in the ways that actually matter.
And one of the things that I can add is I can't imagine any major religion, any religion in general, that doesn't have love as the highest truth. And so any book that was written by the hand of a man or a woman, and they wrote from whatever their evolutionary context was at the time. If you read the Bible, you'll see, the history of what the world was like back then. And have all kinds of confusing things in it. If we take it literally, well, we will be stuck in that time frame. But we don't live in that time frame. I think one of the highest truths is that the truth is a living truth. They said the Word of God is a living word. It's in movement. It's in action. In the world of yoga, they said the living truth is Om. It's eternally growing, eternally evolving. So it's like, are we going to listen to the highest truth? Or are we going to listen to, whatever, this guy or that gal wrote back in whatever time frame it was? One of the things that I did quite young as a kid is my parents used to take me to the Catholic church, and I would walk into the church and I would fall in love with the church. But my God, I barely listened to what the priest said ever. In fact, I don't even know what the hell he was talking about. I mean, a lot of times it was something, the Assyrians this or the Corinthians that, and I don't know, I had no idea what it was. But I walked in and I didn't connect through my head. I just connected through my heart and felt this very active presence of love. And so there was no problem with anything. But if we connect through our head to a religion, hell, we'll find problems with any tradition. And we should, because none of them are perfect, and all of them are growing, and all of them need help.
Thank you so much.
So like everyone else has said, thank you guys so much for being here. And this is just so healing for me, being here with all these vegans who just get it. I kind of needed this. And so my question is kind of about being in the larger world. And you talk about people who would never do these things themselves. They ingest or consume these things, but they have that disconnect. My immediate family and community I live in is really hard for me as a vegan because they get it. They, like my sister, for instance, has 100 chickens she'll be processing in a week. And if I go to my brother's house, my brother-in-law's house, there's a grizzly bear skin hanging on the wall that he killed and is very proud of. So there's not that disconnect for them. Like, they get it, they do it. They engage in the raising and the killing themselves. And my question is, I love them very much, and you know, being connected to them is so important to me, but it's so hard sometimes to really be able to understand them, because at this point, I mean, I've been vegetarian and vegan now for 11 years, combined vegetarian and vegan. They know there's another way. They see me thriving. They've seen my 5-year-old daughter growing her whole life without, you know, animal products. I don't expect them to change. I would love it, but I know they'll never change. But I don't know how, like, for my own sanity, how to be able to be with them, knowing, you know, I don't know. I'm not phrasing it very well, but we don't talk about it. You know, I kind of put up walls, and that doesn't really feel honest, but it feels safe. But then I go home and I kind of bottle it up, and I vent it all on my husband. And he's a meditator. He meditates a lot. And he tells me, you know, he listens, but then he tells me that, you know, these are like me judging them and wanting them to be different, which I don't do to their face, but I do it in my head. And then I do it to him, you know. Is me having violent thoughts in a way and putting more violence out there. And I get that, but it's so hard on like a practical level. I'm just wondering if you guys have any advice or insight.
Well, I've got two things. A friend of mine gave me a great definition of boundaries, which is creating the space necessary to stay present with you. So unfortunately, it may look like creating more space from your family if it's constantly throwing you into the suffering of their ways and their beliefs and their reality. But on the flip side of that, there's a very real necessity to grieve the loss of the relationship that you would ideally like to have with them, because you guys can't come to terms on something that's so fundamentally based in a value that's important to you. But overall, you already have the answer. It requires total acceptance of allowing them to behave in whatever way they are, and a bigger understanding that we're creating the shift towards a vegan world. Even though I think most of us would agree that it is probably more natural for us to be vegan, it is not normal to be vegan. It's not what's most present in the world. So when we resist what is, we're creating the conflict that causes the suffering. Mm-hmm. But through that state of allowance, that's where you're going to affect the most change. And if they feel allowance and love and total acceptance from you, they're actually more likely to change through your example than if you're subtly and quietly judging them on the inside. So.
That is such a good answer, I think. Well said. Yeah, I think one thing you said is they get it. They're not disconnected, but I would say they still are actually probably disconnected. Because if they wouldn't go around and murder a human and stick them on their wall, then they're not seeing, you know, like we were just talking about in a question or two ago, the equality, the similarity, that is there, that is the disconnect with most people. There's some sort of prejudice against them because of how they're covered on the outside. So I think there is still a disconnect, even if they know there's another way to live. They think, yeah, but they're here for us. They think, this is fine, this is normal. There's something. There's some sort of excuse, part of that belief system that they're still holding on to, even though you being a living testament of a vegan lifestyle has probably crossed off a lot of them. There's still something there that they have yet to understand or connect with. And let's say that even maybe they did connect to everything, which I don't think that's the case, but like Ren just said, it's not normal in this society. And one big sticking point for a lot of people is they don't have the courage it takes to do something that the rest of the world isn't doing yet. You know, the first people that went vegan, you know how we've got this like extreme vegan stereotype? That's because the first people that went vegan would have had to be pretty extreme, man. You know, they would have had to be, because no one else was doing it. That takes a lot of courage. That takes a certain type of personality. And then the people after that were still quite courageous as well. And then the people after that were less so, but still felt it right. And I think we're at the sort of next point, I would say now, where it's becoming far more mainstream. And then what will happen is we'll get to this point where there's so many people doing it that those people that didn't go vegan because they were afraid of what everyone else felt will have to go vegan because they'll be afraid of what everyone else thinks. Yeah.
There's one thing I would want to add too, that if you're going to have an open heart in this world, you better be prepared to feel, and you better be good at grieving. It's just true. I mean, you have to be willing to let go, and you have to be willing to feel the pain. If you don't feel the pain, you don't actively grieve it, you'll end up being judgmental or angry. I mean, that's what happens. If you bottle it all up inside, you end up angry. It just doesn't work. So to have an open heart in this world, you have to be courageous. And that means we feel everything. People think to have an open heart means you run around the park like a hippie and feel this bliss, like you're this bliss bunny running around. But if you look at any great spiritual master, they're incredibly strong, incredibly powerful. And they grieve every day. It's like when I see the news, I cry. But it feels good to let it go. It doesn't haunt me. It empties it out, and then I feel refreshed and renewed. And so then I can recommit myself and re-step into my work. But if we don't grieve, we create incredible division within ourselves and division within our community.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to say one more quick thing to you and to anyone. You said they'll never go vegan. You never know when someone is or isn't going to go vegan. Slaughterhouse workers go vegan. Hunters go vegan. I went vegan.
Yeah, horse trainers go vegan.
Yeah, right? You never know, mate. You never know. Just keep the hope, and maybe they never will, but at least you'll be there as a shining example, and that's all you can do. You're not responsible for anyone else's choices or decisions. Unfortunately, they'll do what they do, but at least you'll know that you're doing your best, you're being a shining example and showing, modeling that behavior.
Hi, I'm Juniper, and first of all, I just wanted to thank all three of y'all for sharing your wisdoms with us. I really appreciate it. I'm also a horseman, and so I had a question for you, Ren. I have two horses. One of them I actually work with, and the other one's just a foster. But I grew up very steeped in a traditional English culture, hunter-jumper, eventing, stuff like that. My horse riding, my horsemanship in general certainly probably doesn't look very vegan right now to the outside eye, but my own experience of it, I've come very far. I truly used to view my horse as less than a pet, even just a expensive item, I guess, that I put a lot of work into and took care of, but wasn't so much of a creature, I guess. I'm not really sure. But right when I went vegan, and this horse came off the track, so he's very antisocial, never could really get along in a herd, only just recently has developed a relationship with another horse, which, as you know, it's very important for horses to be in a herd setting. And so this lack of a herd setting for him, his anxiety and seemingly anger has certainly made him, he doesn't have any social outlet, I guess. And then right when I went vegan, he got injured, and a veterinarian prescribed him 6 months of stall rest, which is essentially torture for a horse. And at that point, he was getting very angry. He was bashing down the stall door. He was completely uncontrollable, having to be sedated all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And as I was going vegan and connecting with other vegan friends and stuff like this, I was often told about positive reinforcement and offering stimulation to the horse in a positive manner for the horse to have outlets, and I guess to also be able to train the horse in a manner that's not involving bits, whips, and spurs. So I was really interested to hear that you don't necessarily use positive reinforcement and just base it off of purely a relationship with a horse. And I was wondering what you would do in that type of situation, or with a horse that is going to take years before he could even be a part of a herd, or specifically when he's shut into a box for 6 months.
Well, first, I want to commend you for your amazing courage to stand up and speak to that while you're in transition, because that's huge. First of all, it doesn't take years. It can happen in a split second if the animal is completely recognized and allowed to be how they are, where they are, and accepted for that space. That's when the healing happens. That's when the transition happens. So when a vet tells me a horse has to have 6 months of stall rest, I get a new vet. Because horses need 4 fundamental things that are their basic needs. And movement is a huge part of that, even if it risks damage to a degree. And I won't go into a lot of detail with that. But in that situation, I would try to provide as much movement as possible. You can become the herd, because you were trying to see the animal beyond their biology. You're trying to connect essence to essence. So through that connection, you can restore their sense of connection and well-being in a herd setting. That doesn't mean that we're a better choice than herd mates that are of their own species, but we're talking beyond that. For me individually, it has a lot to do with spending one-on-one time with no agenda, no expectation, not trying to control them for your own use or personal benefit. And in that space, a massive transformation and healing can occur, and it will actually help them reduce their time of healing physically as well. I've rehabilitated and healed some of the worst horse cases you can imagine. That's why I have so many, unfortunately. But so I mean, if you have more specific questions than that, but basically it has to do with honoring and respecting what that individual's needs are outside of the scope of what we think their needs are.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Hannah. I drove here from Wilmington, and on the way I saw like 4 different factory farm settings, just buildings and buildings, windowless buildings of animals. And I guess on the way here, I was just feeling so disheartened. And, I'm trying to come here to draw inspiration and preach on, what I feel is right to my friends and family who maybe don't understand that. But I just had a question. I was wondering, how do you stop from feeling completely stamped out and stomped down from industries and corporations in this world? How do you make your voice heard?
You just don't talk for a whole year. I think the best way to combat the helpless feeling, because I think that's probably the worst feeling as a vegan, is feeling helpless, is to be active in some way in spreading this message, or to actively help animals, or to in some way be doing something to increase the peace and reduce the suffering. Because then 100% that you are contributing. I think for me, I don't get down very much anymore. A few reasons. One is that I'm contributing daily and seeing change in people regularly, so I guess I'm lucky in that way. But also, I've made the decision that I don't believe it is helpful to the animals to be upset, to be, in a dark place or this and that. And I mean, obviously it's normal, it's natural, you can't help how you feel sometimes. But when I had the realization that being that way, feeling guilty, how can I go enjoy myself when I know what's happening to these animals, and that guilt that I was carrying, I've turned that guilt instead into gratitude for my own blessed, privileged life. And it's a far more empowering way to feel, because when I was feeling guilty, I'd feel negative. I wouldn't be a very good advocate. I'd probably get into more aggressive discussions with people. And when I turn that guilt into gratitude for how lucky I am, I'm so, I could have been born a pig. I'm so lucky and so grateful. And that's an empowering way to think. And that empowered feeling can be directed into some sort of positive action. And when you are creating positive action and planting seeds in some way or not, I think that's how you start feeling a lot better about it. And I mean, this is going on. It's happening. It's undeniable. It's constant. We don't need to focus on that. I've spent the last 3 days at slaughterhouses watching the animals come through and getting footage of these animals. And I don't let it upset me, because when I'm there, I'm thinking about, this is so great. We get to show so many people these animals. People are going to make the connection. Things are changing. Look at all these activists here. I just try to, you're going to think about things anyway. You're going to have however many thousand thoughts in a day. I just try to be a bit more deliberate about focusing on those good things. Because yes, the cruelty is happening always. But there's also this whole other list of things that we can focus on that are positive and good, that I think, in my experience, they help me. I used to feel guilty and horrible all the time. Now I feel so optimistic and positive, and and that helps me help the animals even more as well.
I think if you're going to do this work, you have to have a strong heart. And a big part of having a strong heart is doing, very much like James is saying, is focusing on the positive. But, you have to admit the reality, too. And it may be brutal to say, but you have to get comfortable with the reality, to know it exists, and be able to breathe into that pain, but simultaneously, to walk in the direction of the world that you want. You have to. What I see, I work with a lot of activists. When I see a lot of them crash and burn, it's because they don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to take care of their emotions. And they just, they spin out and, become helpless victims. And we can't let that be the path for us. As a young kid, I remember my father used to talk about these bleeding heart liberals. And I was like, I think he might be talking about me. But you have to be careful that your heart does not bleed out. And if we're going to talk about it from a spiritual context, the journey, of having that open heart is that, in Zen they call it a strong back, open heart. You have that very strong backbone and a very open heart. You have to have both. If you don't, you collapse. If your heart's just open without a backbone, you get nowhere in the world, and you always be crying. You always be a mess, always be emotional. And so to have that strong back that's rooted in acceptance, but also it's connected with courage, connected with your strength. You can ask for help from above. If you have a relationship with God, you ask for help from within, and that deep power within your heart. And you ask for help from within your community, and to connect with them and walk forward into the light. That's the way forward. But you need to learn how to take care of your heart, or you'll be, crying all the time. And, I cry, I can have tears 5 days a week, but it doesn't knock me over. To me, it's just a movement of letting go of the pain and the suffering of this world, but then also simultaneously connecting with that which is good and walking forward with that.
I don't have much to add to that, because both of those, it's great advice. Especially James, like where you focus your attention. As vegan advocates, we know what's going on. We don't need to constantly put ourselves in the mess of it. So you've got to take care of yourself first. Maintain an open heart, like Craig said. But then don't forget to go out at night every now and then and look up at the stars and remember that we're on a tiny spinning ball, and there is something much, much bigger than what we're looking at going on here, and we don't really know. And there's some comfort for me, at least, in that.
Thank you guys so much.
We have time for about one more question. So this will be great.
I hear a lot of people say to me, Well, human beings are animals, and animals eat animals, and so since human beings are omnivores, it's natural for us to eat. And some, the paleo people claim that human beings are essentially carnivores, I think. But it's like, I know that you can't sit there and just start preaching to people. People have to be open to a discussion. But if someone is open to discussion, I'm interested in what you all have to say about how you would, how you would talk with that person who says that we're animals and so it's natural for us to eat animals. And of course we are animals, but...
We are. But we're not lions. So when people say that animals eat other animals so we can eat other animals, well, lions also sometimes kill and eat their babies, but we don't say, what's wrong with what I just did? I saw a lion do it once. You know what I mean? Get off my case, man. Yeah, of course we are animals, but we have the abundance of choice. Unlike a lion, we have supermarkets. They don't. They have to kill to survive. We're not omnivores. We are much more closely related to a herbivore or frugivore. And that, yeah. Despite what they taught me in Year 7 science class, it's pretty simple to see that. And they might say, well, we evolved eating animals, so now we can. Yeah, we can. We've evolved to create guns. Doesn't mean we should go and shoot somebody. What we can do and what is a good thing to do are two completely different things. We can do all kinds of things that aren't a positive way of contributing to this world. Lions kill for need, humans kill for greed, and that's the only real reason. And you can see the proof of how we're made when people are dying from heart disease, which is the biggest killer in the world, in a world where almost every single person, 97, 98% of people in this world are eating animal products. And so the biggest killer in the world is heart disease. The only diet ever proven to reverse heart disease is a vegan diet, a plant-based diet. That alone, to me, is one of the most obvious things that proves what we're supposed to eat. If what everyone is eating is killing them prematurely, decades before they should have died, and when we start eating just plants, we can almost eradicate that disease, well, I don't know, that's enough evidence for me to just eat plants. But even if that wasn't the case, we still have a choice. Someone says, no, it's just as healthy. Okay, I don't care. Let's say you can be healthy either way, which is obvious because there's millions of vegans in this world living and not dead. So it's definitely true. Okay, let's concede that they're equally healthy, eating animal products, not eating animal products. We have the choice. And when you have a choice between eating foods that cause the destruction of this planet and the death of an innocent being, and it's a burger. And then you've got this vegan burger over here that tastes the same, that looks the same. Why would you choose to still kill that animal when there's no necessity like a lion where they have to, when you know you can be perfectly healthy and still, just by bonus, eat delicious, amazing food? Why would you choose to kill the animal? That's what I would ask.
Yeah, one of the things that I found quite helpful is talking less and feeding more. It's just feeding people. And I tell you what, I am a terrible cook. But when people just see what I eat, they say, oh, I didn't realize you could just eat like that. Sometimes I go out into the desert and I climb with these, I go rock climbing with these fellas, and they're big and they're rough and tough and they're like pro climbers. And when I look at what they eat, it's in the morning it's eggs and sausage and then like hamburger and ground meat, and they're doing everything, to build, a lot of protein, so they can have really big, strong muscles and this and that. But occasionally they'll just look at me and they'll say, "Oh, Craig, what are you eating there?" It'll be just a little noodle soup with kale or whatever, and and they'll say, "Well, what is that?" And then they'll say, "Can I try some?" And then pretty soon they're eating my food, and they're enjoying it. One of my friends just the other day, he said, he just sat and he had lunch with me. And he said, Craig, does it offend you if I get, a hamburger? And I said, no, it's not going to offend me. And then he stopped for a moment. And then he just decided to try, the vegan black bean burger. And he had it, and he said, oh, that's wonderful. And I didn't tell him anything. I didn't push it down his throat. And then he came back the next day to my house and said, Craig, I went a whole day without eating meat. And to me, that's just how sometimes things change. Yes, it's good to talk to people, but they have to be open. They have to be willing. But if someone comes over to your house, and you cook them a wonderful dinner, and they see, oh, this is how you eat. Or you take them to your garden and show them all the different plants you can eat. The wheels start turning in their head. Their heart starts to open, and they say, oh, this is really good. I like this. Maybe I'll have more of this. And they begin to naturally fall into something. And then it's not an argument. We're not pulling teeth with someone. We're not, getting in a fist fight or throwing rocks. It's just a movement of love, simply through cooking someone a meal. I think the Hare Krishnas were doing that approach for a long time. You could go to their temple, and they would just feed you. You didn't even have to pay for it. Afterwards, if you want to give a donation, you can. They said, this is what vegetarian food is. This is what it tastes like. And see, it's those steps forward, and where you get people, you open their hearts to it. And hell, you might even open their stomach to it, and they say, oh, this is good. And then something changes within them.
It's really amazing to me how common that is. Like, you can get on any comment thread or forum, and that argument is used. Well, the animals are eating animals, so I can too. But to me, that's a sign of somebody who is completely out of their power, who is now looking at a lion to decide how to be a human. So the best way to engage in those conversations, in my experience, is to help that person return to their power by asking them questions, asking them that if they knew that all of their nutritional needs could be met, would they still want to take the life of another? And what is their real truth? And how does it make them feel to know that a life was taken for their own nourishment or perceived nourishment? And just leave judgment completely out of it, because that's not going to be a good way to open up a conversation. Sure. And just get to asking questions and finding out what is this person's real need and what is keeping them from making a loving change. Mm-hmm.
So thanks again. Thank you to James, Craig, and Ren for being here. Thanks to our audience members for those amazing questions. That was phenomenal.